As I get older, Maggie's in her late 40s now, and I'm just shy of my 23rd birthday.
I like that we've at one point called you 15, at others like 85. Who's to say?
I've really grown to appreciate the literary canon and what that means across artistic mediums, like classics. And I think you and I mean, basically since around the time we started doing this show, we've tried to fill in those knowledge gaps and those classics as we developed this fanatical interest in horror and fantasy and all this other.
Yes.
I've loved watching the classics. I mean, just since we started the show, I've seen the original Halloween. I've seen the original Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, all the Halloween sequels.
Evil Dead.
Evil Dead, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And I mean, most of the movies I just mentioned are now my favorite movies.
Right.
They're so stone cold perfect.
Yeah.
And this, we're talking about Hellraiser today, which feels like another entry in that canon.
Yeah, a big time classic that for a long time I was not interested in because I didn't understand it. I thought it looked very sci-fi to me just from the imagery.
Right.
And I was like, I don't give a shit about that.
So yeah, this is, and the thing that made me fall in love with it, apart from the trailer and how cool the bad guys look, is that this is written and directed by Clive Barker, who is adapting his own novella.
Which is a really cool thing. I love that. I should also say, this is not a sci-fi movie at all. My expectations were completely off.
I
loved
this movie.
This movie
is half Evil Dead, half Rocky Horror.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly what it is.
Because Evil Dead, with the scrappiness of the filmmaking, the emphasis on practical effects and creature design and atmosphere.
The gore, the blood.
And the like psychosexual tension and fascination with infidelity and promiscuity from Rocky Horror.
Exactly. This is not quite as funny as Rocky Horror.
There's a lot in this that's, I mean, it's an incredibly fun movie.
It's really fun, yeah. It's not really scary. Like, at no point was I afraid. I was more just, like, unsettled by the imagery, you know?
Yeah, but like, it was a fun balance of campiness and moments of violence that were genuinely upsetting.
Yeah, like, I think what was so... Because a lot of horror, especially, like, older classic horror, is very campy, and, like, it's fun, and you're there for it, and you're along for the ride, and it's great. This movie has, like, elements of camp, but it's so, like, hyper-stylized and surreal that you accept like the visual language of the film, and so you're just like, you're bought in, and so then everything still feels very real within the scope of the movie. Do you know what I mean?
It feels so timeless and complete.
Sorry about my rattling coffee, by the way. I'm using a Yeti, which is the loudest cup in existence, so sorry.
And the first point I kind of wanted to play with here was genre, something we just kind of hit on. And I was writing down bullet points of how you'd categorize this movie.
Sorry, I should say, we're not going to spoil this movie. I mean, we might a little bit, but like, if you haven't seen it, you're safe to listen to this.
It's an hour and a half. It's on Amazon Prime. Go watch it.
It's also been out for like 4 years.
That too.
But anyway, just a heads up. I think it's good to leave that at the top.
And my first impression was it's, like I said before, like a psychosexual thriller. But it's also a camp horror masterpiece.
Yeah.
It's a really effective satire of the satanic panic and sexual revolution. But it's also a modern Faustus story.
Of course it is. How is it a Faustus story, Cam?
Well, Maggie, the movie opens with a guy summoning a demon and then being dragged away to hell.
No, you're absolutely right. I'm just laughing because you managed to make every movie a Faustus story. This one, I
but if it's a horror movie with demons in it, you've got to give me that one.
Well, and there's like this woman is like indebted to this demon guy also. So yeah.
Frank is I mean, he's a straight Faustus character. Like I mean, he is Faustus.
Yeah.
And we sort of go from there. And then the lead character that we follow, Julia, is kind of the Helen of Troy that we see in Dr. Faustus. But the subtext of her role in Marlowe's play is that it's not really Helen of Troy. It's Faustus wanting a wife and wanting all the pleasures and opportunities and infinity of hell and the afterlife. And it's Mephistopheles, the demon who has like bartered his soul and is now his like caretaker. It's him projecting this image of Helen of Troy as whatever he needs to project to seduce Faustus to lock down his soul.
Yes, right.
And in that same vein, I think we have to consider that yes, Frank is a Faustus character, and he summons a demon and then gets ripped apart and dragged to hell, just exactly what happens to Faustus.
Right.
And then whatever other demons there are, I mean, we see the Cenobites, we see 4 demons here, and they're allusions to a bunch of other ones. That then another demon is trying to get Julia's soul.
Yes,
and
right.
To Frank, the most irresistible thing in the world was the puzzle box. He opens it, boom, dead, gone. For Julia, the most
that's at the
irresistible...
top of the movie, by the way. That's not a spoiler. Like, that's the opener.
Yeah, it's the premise.
Yeah.
But the most irresistible thing in the world, or beyond the world, for Julia is Frank. So we have to consider that it's not just a story of Frank beyond the grave trying to like get his skin back and kind of reform as a zombie. Yeah. But maybe it's just a demon taking on the form that is most alluring to Julia.
Totally. I think my favorite thing about this movie was Julia. And I think I'll back up. I was doing some research on the film, just your basic IMDb stuff, and the original title of this movie was The Hellbound Heart, which I think is very like Edgar Allan Poe, which I love.
That's the novella title.
Yes, right. But they decided that sounded too much like a romance, and so they were just like spitballing ideas. One crew member, like a 60-year-old woman, she offered what a woman will do for a good fuck, which I think sums up this movie so beautifully. Because I think what's so fun about Julia is that she's a really different kind of female horror lead. Yeah, like horror almost always has a female lead. Like that's not what's special about this, but she's a different kind. She's not the virginal goody two shoes like Laurie Strode. Is it Strode? Sorry, I just second guessed myself. Anyway, and she's not like the final girls of Texas Chainsaw or Friday the 13th, but she's also not like this really cool badass like Ripley in Alien. She like kind of falls somewhere else. She's basically a villain. She's an anti-hero. Yes. And her motivation in all of this is not survival. It's not love. It's not wanting to live. It's not caring for others. It's just sex. That's all that's motivating
versus
her.
Versus the classic final girl. And Cabin in the Woods kind of riffs on this idea that the final girl has to be the moralistic virgin.
Yes, right.
And this is so not that.
And, but it's also not like, Ripley, who's like not even a virgin, but like just like this, like not even sexual, like is just like cool, is a man, right? Is just cool and trying to survive. That's how I see her.
I think she's a very female character.
No, I know. I just mean like she has like that like I've only seen the movie once, but Ripley is not like, I don't know where I'm going with that. I don't know what I'm saying.
I think she's a legendary female protagonist.
I don't
think
she's
you
awesome.
Can just say she's a man.
That's not what I mean either. I just back up. Never mind. Back up from Ripley. I'm saying this Julia is not like Ripley at all either. No. Like Julia is just this entirely different kind of character, and
it's not just as a horror protagonist,
right?
Just as
any female
character.
Yeah, and so like that's literally all that's motivating her, because it's like it's clear that she maybe loves her husband well enough. Like she doesn't dislike him. She's not. I mean, he's kind of boring, but she has no like problems.
She's indifferent.
She's fine with her husband, right? It's not like she's in love with someone else. Like she just wants to have sex with Frank, even when he's like a weird demon.
Well, I think it's love compared to what she feels for her husband.
Sure.
It's much more intense.
But it's not like the only time that like we get flashbacks to how they meet and stuff, it's never about a relationship. It's never about them loving each other. It's just flashbacks to like the one time they had sex. Right. And I find that so funny. Like that's such an interesting way, especially because I like that you brought up Cabin in the Woods. Horror almost like very often uses sex in some way. It's part of the horror genre. Mm-hmm. Usually, in your more like traditional sense, it's meant to like separate the virginal hero who deserves to live with the deviant sexual characters who deserve to die, right? Like it's always the kids who are having sex in the next room, they're the first ones to die because they're being bad, right? Or sometimes sex is just used as a way to like make a horror movie more fun and goofy to appeal to a teenage audience, right? It's like meant to contrast.
It's everyone,
but yeah, but you know what I'm saying.
It has worked for the entirety of human history to get people's attention.
But you know what I'm saying. But instead, what's happening here is that the sexual element is part of the horror. Like it's essential to the protagonist's motivations, and it's essential to the villains like MO and their motivations and their goals. I think the scariest part of this movie is not that these Cenobites, these demons, are going to kill you or drag you to hell. The scariest part is they're going to sexually abuse you, and they're going to make the torture and pain you'll endure sexual in nature. Like I think that's what's so unsettling about what they're trying to do. It's not just, oh, they're going to kill me. It's they're going to like pull me into this like sadomasochistic thing that I don't want to be a part of.
And it's interesting. So if Frank is a straight Faustus character, Faustus in the Marlowe context is an older professor who has discovered everything he can in the world of theology from books and thinking. So he wants to see the real thing. That's the only thing left for him to do. He's exhausted all worldly opportunities to learn about theology. Frank has done that sexually.
Yeah.
So the only hints we get about what he sees, what he gets when he opens the puzzle box and has this weird... all we see is this like rotating barber pole with hooks and shit on it that then rips him apart. But he refers to that experience as being the height of pain and pleasure. And this whole kind of muddy intersection between those euphoric feelings. And that the like terror and intensity of that is the thing that rips him apart twice in this movie.
Yeah.
I like that is, it's kind of clarifying that, like you said, we're not in the realm of theology here. We're in the realm of human sexuality. And we're pursuing that as rigorously as an elder statesman professor would everything, all of his books in his library that he trashes in the first scene of the play. It's very committed to this. As fun and campy as the movie is, it's rigorous. In exploring these ideas and this topic. It's not half-hearted. It's not ironic.
Right. No, it's very dedicated. Yeah, it's like this movie is campy, but it doesn't feel like it's making fun of anything the way that some other campy movies are. And I think it's also interesting to think about this like just in historical context. Like if it's playing with these ideas of sexual deviancy and what does that mean? Like this movie came out in 1987. Like AIDS crisis, like the
Reagan administration,
the fear and criticism of sexual deviancy is like really big right now when this is coming out. And when I was reading the trivia, this movie was originally a lot more graphic, and the MPAA did not like that. And like one example is they had them cut a scene of like a sodomy scene out, which is just like very telling for what's going on at the time. Like, yeah, you can have a guy's like skin ripped apart by hooks, but no, you can't have a sodomy scene.
So there's a scene here, I'm trying to avoid spoilers. There's a scene here where someone's killed with a hammer. Yeah. And you've seen that before, right? You've seen that with axes and all sorts of weapons. That's such a classic, slasher thing of someone being chased through an environment.
There's a mallet in Texas Chainsaw,
Right. And the first mallet shot you get in Texas Chainsaw is brutal. But it's because of the thud and the stillness of it. The hammer shot you get here, and then the cut to the character's face who just got hit is genuinely unsettling gore. Yeah. And I don't think I can't remember the last time I was unsettled by a horror movie. But it's...
I can. The one we watched last night.
Yeah,
which
tune
we'll
in
talk
next
about
Tuesday.
next week. Anyway, sorry.
But just the way it screws up the guy's face is so thought out. Yeah. And I don't know what that looks like. But your brain registers it as true.
Yes, right. Exactly. That's what I was talking about earlier. Like the visual language of this movie is so... You buy into it so early on in the film that you believe everything you're seeing.
But
Sorry.
No, I was just, before we get into the creature design, I wanted to finish off the Julia thing because I had a little to add there.
Yes, of course.
I just wrote in italics, what a protagonist. She's so flawed and messy. It was so refreshing to see any protagonist in a movie be this actively selfish, villainous, evil, and just flagrantly unlikable.
Yeah.
But the whole time, even when she's seducing and killing people, she's so captivating and human. Like you see the selfishness balanced out with moments of guilt, but those are always overpowered and shown up by stronger moments of desire.
Yes, right. Like that's her biggest motivation. That's the biggest thing that's driving her.
And then in the context of her being a female protagonist, it was again refreshing that Clive Barker just tells the fucking story. There's no fussy moral hand-wringing or assurances. It's fearless storytelling about screwed up people.
Yeah, it's not, now Julia's bad, so we have to make that clear. There's none of that.
But there's no we're not saying that all women are bad, of course. It's just, there's no FBI disclaimer at the beginning about who's a good role model for the children.
Yeah, right.
He's just telling a story, which is the job of an artist.
And even if you are upset by that, you have the daughter as the more typical virginal final girl.
Right, but it was fun in a 2022 context.
Yeah.
Because it's everything now is viewed through the lens of being a morality play or some sort of generalized statement.
What message are we sending
Right.
to the
If you
viewers?
have a character who's a woman do something bad, what are you saying about all women?
Yeah,
I mean,
like,
you can
oh,
stretch that
God.
out to any demographic of any story.
Yeah.
And I think that is agonizing. That is the total death of art.
Yeah.
It's broken media literacy.
Yeah, that's cancer. I hate that.
It poisons any work of art you apply that to. That shit is insane. This is just like joyfully telling a wildly fucked up story.
Yes.
And it's so much fun. And despite that lack of moralizing and preachiness, like Dr. Faustus, there is a constant moral underpinning in this story. While it's having fun and breaking all those rules, in the end, the villains are ultimately punished and lose, and the innocent character escapes.
Yeah. Right.
Like Faustus ends on this moral turn after delighting in the irreligious kind of fun of the character Faustus. It was very refreshing. And this script as a whole, I mean, we're talking about the plot, but if you look at the script, and we've been watching that Witcher show, which is maybe why I appreciate this so much right now.
I know.
It's so efficient and twisty. There's a restlessness to this that feels so polished.
Yeah.
And maybe it's because it's an hour and a half, and I'm used to things being needlessly long.
Yeah,
I mean, we
right.
talked about Stranger Things episodes are now hitting 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
This feels like such a product of revision. It's such a tightly told story with so much effort palpable in every shot.
Yeah,
like
definitely.
it reminded me of that the Hamilton song, the one shot,
Yeah.
or the lose yourself Eminem thing. Like there is such
My shot.
hustle here.
Yes, totally. Yeah.
Yeah, I
They're
really loved
they're
it.
really going for it. Yeah, I think this is a great
Yes,
time to talk about the
exactly.
practical effects. They are absolutely going for it here. And again, the practical effects are hyper stylized. Like the blood is way too cherry red. The skin is way too like stringy and flimsy and like but because there's like a specific visual language to this movie and it's so hyper stylized, like you are bought in and you recognize it as real and believable in the context of in the framing of the movie. And I think that's really impressive and well done. And they hold up. Like this movie is made in 1987 and I think these effects hold up really well in ways that I think, I mean, I'm always going to say this. CG effects are never going to be as good as practical effects. Like, I think these are so well done. I love the blood. I love the hooks in the skin. And the creature design is so impressive.
Yeah, so let's break down the creature design.
Yeah.
The Cenobites. That's the term for demons. We get 4 of them in this movie. There's the guy who came to be known as Pinhead, who was kind of the ringleader because the other ones couldn't talk in the makeup.
Yes.
So they gave him most of the lines. And
Yeah.
even though in the books, he's not the ringleader. It's the blob-looking one.
Oh, okay.
The one that looks like a big maggot.
I was going to say,
You know?
that's the one I didn't like. It looked a little too Star Wars for me.
Yeah, and maybe that's just in a visual medium, it reads different.
Yeah.
But there's also the woman with the like tracheotomy thing.
That thing is freaky.
But my
it looks
favorite,
like a vulva on her neck. It really
it
freaked
does.
me out. I didn't like it.
like Alien, you
Yeah.
have that sort of vaginal imagery.
Yeah.
But the 4th Cenobite is my favorite.
Which one is
The
that?
Chatterer.
Oh, yeah, with the teeth and the
Yes,
gums.
yeah.
Yeah, that one was freaky. I love that one.
So there's a lot of variety here. We only get 4 of them, but they're all fascinating to look at. Like you said,
Yes.
they operate within the same visual language, but they all feel wholly original in the same way that Star Wars did.
Yeah.
When you see the first couple, like
Sure.
there's a weird style there.
Yeah, they're
that-
not just like red devils or like little skeletons or zombies. Like they are completely original, which I found very cool.
And I think that the Star Wars comparison is good because there is such a quirky rigidity to Star Wars style, where when you see like stuff in the Boba Fett show, when you get a biker gang of like these neon motorbike
They
things,
look like they're from the movie Tron.
those show up and your brain just says, nope, that's not Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
But other stuff just clicks.
Yes.
And there's that same, you develop that sort of judgment about the consistency of that style here too. And I my favorite thing was that we didn't get the backstories of these demons.
Yeah, like
'Cause
they're just there.
The tracheotomy thing, the Pinhead, the blob guy, I'm sure there are stories there.
Yeah.
Or if they become sort of metaphors for whatever those demons did wrong when they were angels or people or
I was
whatever.
going to say,
it
were
is.
they people that were brought
Right.
down just like Frank was? Like they were
Right.
originally like sexually deviant people, and now they I
But-
don't know, maybe the girl.
I don't know.
I don't know.
But like the original Star Wars movies,
Yeah.
mercifully unexplained.
Yes.
We don't need a 6-part prequel exploring why the Chatterer looks like he's cold.
No,
It
that's
doesn't
not
matter at
the
all.
point. Why does Pinhead have pins in his head?
It doesn't matter. It's
cares?
cool and gross and brutally memorable.
And it makes you so uncomfortable because you're
Yes.
thinking about. I mean, it's the same thing as when when you were a kid and you were growing up and you were looking in National Geographic magazines and you saw like indigenous cultures with like tattoos on their faces or like pins in their lips or
Right.
something, and you were like, what on earth is that?
Sure.
And it feels so foreign to you if you don't have any context or familiarity with it.
Yeah.
And you're wondering, what was that like? How did that feel when it happened? Why would you do that?
What's the cultural significance?
Exactly.
Sure.
Yeah. And so that's kind of how this feels. You don't know the backstory. You don't have any context. It just
Right.
feels scary and different.
But it feels fully formed. Like we said, it feels thought out. It's committed. It's not this ironic kind of distraction.
No,
it feels like
yeah.
there is a backstory, but there's enough restraint and skill on the part of the people making it that they know we don't need to know all of that.
Yeah, right, exactly. And it also, opens it up nicely for sequels and stuff, but it
Sure.
just makes you wonder more. I think horror movies are so hard to end. It's hard to end a horror story, I think. And I always I always find myself disappointed with many horror endings, but also I cut it some slack because I know it's hard to end. But I always like when they're more ambiguous and when the thing isn't totally wrapped up and closed. Like there's room for, well, how does that happen, or what happens next, or how what's the backstory behind that. I like when there's that leftover that you're left to wonder about, and I think that works really well here because we get a semi-happy ending with someone surviving, but we don't really understand, the demon world is not destroyed.
No,
We don't know what's going on down there, who they're going to grab next or whatever,
The
because
story,
we see the box move on to a next person.
exactly. It's a cyclical ending. And there are billions of other, demon characters that we didn't even see here. We just see the full story of the Frank character.
Yes, right.
But there's so much more to it. And I
Yeah.
think that open door policy at the end of horror movies is usually better.
Yeah.
Versus killing it and then you have to bring it back and
Yes,
bring it back and bring it
yes.
back. And then you have to decide Michael Myers is supernatural.
Yeah, and then you have to send Jason into space.
But that's not even the coolest special effects in this movie.
Okay.
But it's not even the coolest practical effects.
What do you think is?
Frank.
Oh, yes.
In all of his various
Frank is so,
zombie
I
stages.
think his skeleton, the first skeleton phase is my favorite. That one was the most freaky looking, the most real looking, and the most how did they do that?
Yeah.
It almost looks like it must have been CG.
Yeah. It's crazy good.
But it looks so good, and it looks like, how did they do that? It's really impressive.
It might be the greatest I've seen, maybe other than The Thing.
Yeah, because his other iterations are very cool looking. You can tell, oh, it's a guy wearing a suit,
Right.
and you're like,
I
okay.
mean, literally.
yeah.
Yeah.
But this is how did they do that? I think it's really, and just his birth out of the floorboards,
Right.
that was freaky and really, that reminded me a lot of The Thing. It was really cool.
It wasn't just that it looked cool and that it was shot well. It was always unbelievably expressive. It was the way the face could move.
Yeah.
The emotions that it was showing, even as they, again, sort of restrained the dialogue.
Yeah.
So it wasn't in your face and over the top. The slime, the voice work, it just, everything worked together. And it was
Yes.
pretty stunning every time it showed up.
Yes, absolutely.
The other element of the effects I want to talk about is at the end. Where we get every time someone opens the puzzle box, but mostly at the end, the magical energy that is basically, and this is sort of the Rocky Horror connection, where it's basically drawn onto the frames of the film.
Yeah, it doesn't look great. That is the one thing, it kind of dates itself just a little. I mean, I still enjoy it, but it's dated. Go
See,
ahead.
okay.
I'm sorry, did I throw off your entire point?
No, you're just wrong.
Okay.
The point was to pause and say that this is my favorite form of special effects.
Really?
Yeah, it's maybe my favorite moment of Rocky Horror every time I watch that movie.
Well, it works in Rocky Horror because Rocky Horror is so absurd.
Okay, so
Okay.
the fascinating kind of what seems like a contradiction in this movie is that you're pairing those effects of kind of drawing on neon lines and blobs and stuff onto frames of a movie. You're pairing that with the greatest creature effects ever made.
Yeah.
I think it heightens both.
Okay.
Because, like we said, there is a visual language. But I think this works within that. It gives it a variety, visual flair, and it has character. Like, hyperrealism sucks. It's unbearably boring.
Sure.
And I think it's fairly artless.
Yeah.
And this is a hyper-stylized movie. I pulled the Kubrick quote that real is good, interesting is better.
Yes, sure.
This follows that.
Okay.
There is a charm and scrappiness and hustle in those neon yellow blobs.
Yeah.
Like, I made the kind of Hamilton joke before of this being a guy adapting his own novella, writing and directing for the first time. I think he'd done 1 or 2 short films before that.
Wow.
But this is his breakthrough. This is his breakout. I mean, this is his baby. This is everything for him. I love that there's a kind of an auteur effort to him doing all of that himself.
Yeah.
Because he did it with the effects guy over the course of a weekend. He did all those effects.
No, I did read that. That's very cool. I admire that a lot.
Versus the $100 million autopilot of modern CG movies. Like, I would rather watch Clive Barker draw stick figures on a napkin than watch the new Jurassic Park movie.
Absolutely. No, I totally agree with you there.
And it feeds the sense of humor that the movie has. The unmistakable love of horror. And the takeaway was just, I smiled. I knew what was happening.
Yeah,
right.
Like, it was conveying the message.
Like we talked,
telling the story.
You and I were talking last night about like Pixar movies and hyperrealism. Like if you only have so much time and money to make a movie, and you're talking about grass that the characters are walking across, just paint it green. Move on. Like spend your time on the things that matter. Yeah, I don't care about the other stuff.
Yeah,
they spent the time on the practical effects here. So if magic looks weird, and we have no reference point for what magic looks like, that's fine. And the effect is that I knew what was happening immediately. I knew I got it. And it was kind of fun. Yeah. It was stylized, the presentation of it. And everything about this movie is infectious. Yeah. Like, I already want to watch it again. It was fun and inspired and restless. I just loved it.
Yeah, no, I did like that. I think what I meant before was my criteria was, does it hold up over time? And I think the practical effects really do, and those magic effects, I think, date themselves, and that's not their fault. I just think it's really impressive when a horror movie can be just as effective and believable 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 years later. You know?
But, I mean, you could say the iambic pentameter dates Faustus or Shakespeare. Yeah. But if it is consistent throughout, and the style, the language of it makes sense, and the story feels satisfying, intriguing, and complete, then the work elevates and becomes timeless.
No, that's true.
It can be of a time, but it's a perfect product of that time.
And well-executed iambic pentameter can be effective in 2022, in the same way that these effects for the magic have been affecting for you.
Until humanity wipes itself out, Shakespeare is going to be relevant and interesting.
Yes.
I think this film has, it has a bit of that completeness. Yeah. At the time when this came out, Stephen King was saying, like, I've seen the future of horror and it's Clive Barker. Cool. This feels like an absolute shattering the bat home run.
Yeah. The only thing that really does date this movie, though, is that over the course of the movie, Julia looks more and more like David Bowie. I don't understand that choice. I think it's really fun.
But wasn't that a better era for fashion?
Oh, absolutely. 80s fashion is incredible.
Sure.
I adore 80s fashion and style because it's like so absurdly ugly.
Big hair, big shoulders.
The makeup.
Very colorful.
Absurd. I love it so much. So yeah, thanks for joining us on this second episode of Summerween.
What other horror staples, what classics in this canon are we missing?